Hello and welcome to Faithful Grace Studio. I'm Mindy. I'm the creator here at Faithful Grace. And some of you that have been around for a bit have heard me say that many times on camera, just not with my face showing. Most of the time you're seeing my hands and my work surface. But today I wanted to answer a question that I get quite frequently. And that question has to do with AI and what purpose AI serves in Faithful Grace initiatives. So, do I use AI? Yes. The simple answer is yes. I use AI for certain things. Do I use AI in my designs? The answer there, the short answer is no. However, sometimes I do use commercial clip art or commercial components that I purchased from another creator. And I can't attest to whether they use AI in their creations. Sometimes I think they probably do. So some of the components you might see in a kit here and there may be generated by AI by someone else. The only thing that Faithful Grace uses AI for at this time, and I can't promise that this won't change. I will certainly let my customers know if it does. But at this time, the only thing we use AI for is to generate script copy for ads, to help us generate SEO titles and listing descriptions. It just doesn't make sense to start from scratch every time you get ready to do a new listing. AI is so quick with that. So in order to create a new listing, you have to have an SEO title that has keywords in it, SEO keywords. You have to have a description that fits Etsy's parameters at the time. Needs to be keyword in there. You have to have tags. You have to set your listing so that it shows what type of material you used and all that. So it's not just a matter of creating something new and popping it up there. You gotta kind of do some of the groundwork to get it up there. And that is what I use AI for. I use AI to generate those SEO titles, Etsy descriptions, identify keywords. AI doesn't always give you a keyword list that is going to fit into whatever Etsy's parameters are at that time. So sometimes I just use their suggestions to get me started. All that said, I'm going to show you the components that I use to create my journals. I do use some software. I use Photoshop. I use Canva. I use Snagit. Snagit's a TechSmith product that I adore. So I use primarily those three pieces of software, mostly Photoshop. And then I use a lot of scanned in handmade fodder art, watercolor paintings, collage art, things like that I have made outside of the computer with actual tangible things like paper, fabric, paint, ink, things like that. So those components get scanned in at a high resolution. Sometimes I tweak them in Photoshop or sometimes I remove the background or things like that. And then I use those components in the digital products that I create. So much of what you see is an actual physical product or a physical element that is put into a digital product. And I'm going to shift my camera around now and show you some of those products that we're talking about so you can see what I mean when I say they're actual physical pieces you can touch and feel. So this is a notebook that has some of the physical elements that I use in some of my digital designs. these are watercolor paintings, things that I have painted with watercolor and then cut out. So we've got some masks here, lots of botanicals, lots of florals. They're separated in different colors, different sizes, but it's literally just a watercolor flower that I painted. There's a couple of them up close. I'll show you these. And then after they were dry, I used pen or ink or sometimes a paint pen and did some embellishment, some outlining. Sometimes I use gold. Sometimes I don't use any sort of lines like on these. It's just watercolor, and then I simply cut them out. And now then these can get scanned in and used as clip art elements in my designs. So sometimes it's just circles, sometimes it's big florals, sometimes it's little circles, sometimes it's words, as you can see. Sometimes it's dresses. I haven't used those in a while, but I should. There's some more dresses, more flowers. Sometimes it's just kind of artsy folk type botanicals or designs. These are just some designs that I did on paper that I had just colored with. These is probably alcohol ink or maybe even just regular magic marker, who knows, but those might end up in a design at some point. All kinds of things like that. Sometimes I will paint, use watercolor and paint on a book page and then cut it out. This little guy might end up as an element in one of my designs, digital designs at some point. So these are all examples of things that sometimes I use. These are just pen and ink drawings, hearts. Sometimes it's just these little, these are just simple little triangles, but when you cut them out and collage with them, they start taking on a whole new life. So there's a piece of birthday cake, some hearts. So these are just all little pieces of things that I have painted at some point. I'm not sure why that's floating out there. Sometimes it's just leaves. These are just pen drawings that I did on book pages. Here's some bookmarks that I did. So all of these types of things can possibly end up, let me put these back, as components in a digital design. I'll do that later. But then we also have things like this. These are just different pieces of paper. This is a piece of paper that I had some leftover paint in my brush and just got it out on this piece of paper, and then after it dried, added some ink stamps to it. This is the back sheet to a very pretty, very vibrantly colored napkin. I do some decoupaging with napkins, and this was the back sheet that would have normally gotten thrown away, but I decided I didn't want to throw it away. I glued it to a piece of paper, and now I have that to use. These are some that have some spray ink, and this one's been through a lot, but I like the way that it feels. Sometimes it's a mess that I have made. Maybe I used some bubble wrap on my jelly plate one day, and the bubble wrap was all messy, and I wanted to keep it to use it again, but I didn't want it to be globbed with paint, so I just put it down on this piece of cardboard that was laying on my desk, and now I have this piece that might end up in a digital design at some point. So all of these, this thing is full. I don't know if you can see how big it is, but it is full of just different pieces of, these are just pieces that I have drawn on, doodled on. This is a jelly plate print. that I did experiment with some darker colors. I'm not a fan of the darker colors, but this was a nice experiment. More paint and marker marks. Here's some more jelly prints. Here's a collage of some sort. All kinds of embossed pieces. These are all embossed pieces. These are pieces of foil that have been embossed. This is a ticket that I had from back when we got tickets like this when you flew. This was one I had that I had saved. Where was I going? This was even back before you had to put your real name on it, because this is actually not my given name that's on my birth certificate. So, well, I can't tell where I flew to. Oh, it looks like New Orleans. So, old pieces like that. That's these more embossed pieces. I want to get down below where some of the good stuff is. Alright, so here's some pieces that had, like where I had cleaned my brayer or my brush off. Same with these pieces. These were pieces or strips of file folders that I had used kind of underneath some of my work, and then after I made a mess of them with the leftover paint on my brushes, then I went back with some marks, some paint marks and some magic marker marks, and adorned them a little bit. These might end up in a design. Same with these. Here's a really messy piece that was literally just a piece of board that I had been, when I would pull out a paint pen or a magic marker, I would test it out to make sure that it got a good smooth line before I put it on my actual project. And so after I filled it up, I painted some leaves on it. Now I've got that piece to use. Sometimes it's just handwriting, sometimes it's doodling, sometimes it's color doodling. Here's another one of the pieces like I just mentioned. This is paint splatter. These are off my jelly plate. These are off my jelly plate. More off the jelly plate. And all of these are off of something, jelly plate, or even some of these are just, these are old pieces out of date planners or journal planners or calendar planners that I just cleaned my brush off on a couple of times. But now I've got this piece of fodder. So this is literally full of that kind of thing. This is a piece of magazine, page out of a magazine that I cleaned my brayer off on a couple of times, and then I drew some hearts on it with a white pen. I mean, literally things like this. This is one that, a piece of a book page that I had laying on my table when I was doing some watercoloring. And every once in a while, I would just reach over and let some of my paint off my brush when it was real wet, just drip onto this piece of paper. And then after it dried, here's what I ended up with. So this may look familiar if you've seen a couple of my paper packs. This has been scanned. I've used it multiple times creating paper, digital paper. That one I've used in some of my digital paper. All of these, I mean, there's just tons of them. This one has been used in some of my digital paper. So I'm not going to keep going through the bottom we'll get to the bottom. It'll take us all week, but lots of things like this end up in my digital designs, especially in the background, especially sometimes I use them to layer over something else, or to just kind of use as a hint of something. This has ended up in a couple of my digital paper designs. So all kinds of things like this that I have to choose from and use for backgrounds or overlays or things like that. There's also these. Now, I keep telling you that I'm going to do a video at some point of how I make these, and I will. I'm actually working on a set of shabby churches right now. I'm not sure that's what we'll call them, but these shabby houses, there's 2 kits on in my Etsy store. There's shabby houses, junk journal, and then shabby houses repeat junk journal. So it's 2 different sets. Some of them are individual houses. Some of the all these on the top are the individual houses, a bunch of them, and then we have rows of houses, just rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of these houses. And these are, this was put on the back of a file folder that has seen better days. This one too. Some of them may be, yeah, I think most of these are on file folders. Here's one that was done on the back of cereal box. Here's another one that was done on the back of a mashed potato box. So all of these can be used in ways. These are already digitized and already being used in those 2 kits that I mentioned, but also some components are used in other kits sometimes as well. So there's all kinds of things that I create myself in the studio that is then digitized and used in a digital paper pack or a digital junk journal kit. I have some paper dolls in my shop that were all created here myself, along with some watercolor clip art, which came from some of these. So most of what you see in our shop has some sort of hand design to it. Whether it has a piece of the background that was done, hand designed, hand created. Sometimes it's an element, sometimes it's an overlay, sometimes it's a combination of all of that. But that's how we create our lovely designs in our Etsy shop. I hope that answers your question about what I do with AI and what I don't do with AI. If you have any other questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it, and I hope you enjoy creating on your own.